that's fantastic. I've got here with me Kimberly. She's in one of the team food technology team. She's going to talk about fitting teamwork in with
our so in our year 12 class we do a project called College Cuisine, and in that is 2 achievement standards. One is prototyping, trialing, developing a product. The other one is planning tools, where you have to work as a group to design and create a restaurant evening. So they work in groups of 4 to 6 students, depending on capability and depending on numbers in the class. They can pick their groups, and they then have to design and create a menu to serve to at least 30 customers with 3 entrees, 3 mains and 3 desserts. So there is the process of figuring out who wants to work with who. That's always quite fun, but because they get student choice, we see a better result, a better cohesive group than, say, if we were to put them in groups. They then start to brainstorm, come up with ideas. Everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, everyone is able to contribute ideas, and then as a group they vote on which dishes they want to trial. Then we trial them, get some feedback, and then they determine which ones make it onto the menu. And it's a big assessment. Then once everything is finalised, we've tried and tested and we've got our 9 dishes, we have our restaurant evening, and that's where the group work really starts to shine. It's the day that they've been working towards for at least, say, 10 weeks, and they prep throughout the day, and then in the evening they have to make the dishes to serve. So they're working together to make sure that all the entrees are served at the same time. So if it's a group of 4, then essentially there's 1 person on each dish and 1 floating between to help to make sure that it all is ready at the same time and no one's having any issues. So there's lots of conversations and voices through the kitchen, and then they do the same thing for the mains, and then same thing for desserts, and then they celebrate at the end by going out and addressing their guests and thanking them for coming, and
They also get feedback from the guests,
and then they get a final feedback, and then they are able to justify whether their product that they were designing was fit for purpose, designed for what they intended it to do. So whether they do a like-it chart, whether they do short feedback answers, or whether they want to do a mixture of the 2 to determine to get enough information to be able to justify and make those decisions.
And they're slightly bigger groups than usual because they need to have that much to make the food.
Yeah, it is. It is a huge job. I think our biggest group that we had this year was 42 people in, and that was for a group of 6 chefs that we had, and they just managed to, because they need to manage their waitering staff, they need to make sure all the dishes and everything is done. Us teachers are there purely to be observers and a fly on the wall, jump in if we have to, but we'd rather not. But yeah, so it is a bigger group than normal, but it needs to be for how the scale of the project.
Yep. And so then we're looking at the standards now and how that fits together with the standards they have to do.
Yes.
Which at that stage it turns to individuals, doesn't it?
It does. So they do the experience as the group, and then as an individual they need to write about it from their understanding, their perspective. So there are some things that maybe they didn't trial but their group did, so they need to communicate within their group so everybody's got the same information. They need to be able, if they were away a day, they need to know what their group did on that day. So quite often a planning tool that they choose to use is a journal or a diary where they keep track of decisions made. They set goals at the start of the week. Did we meet this goal? Yes, no. So they need to be able to communicate what happened if they were away and how that might work.
Where's that diary kept?
So they keep that either in a Google Docs, and then that's potentially a shared document that they have between them, or it's something that they personally keep individually in their book. And then each group has their own folder that I keep in the classroom, and all their recipes, any bits of paper, any feedback forms go straight into that folder. So everybody has access to that stuff.
That's kept in the classroom. Yep. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. That's Do you want to see?
I'll just have a look at one or
Some
two
stuff.
examples. Yeah.
So, this was an Italian restaurant. This was a group of 6 girls. So they go through, they tell me what they did, who was in their group, how many people came, what was their theme. So they need to have a theme. Tell me about the standards that they're working on. And then they go into what sort of menus they've trialled, what sort of dishes they've trialled, the ideas that they had for their final menu. And then we go in. So this year we focused on trialling our vegetarian dishes, so our vegetarian entree, vegetarian main, because we found if they had to trial and test each dish 2 times, the scale was just too broad and too big, and it was too overwhelming. So we scaled it back for this year, and so one of the vegetarian entrees for this group was a stuffed spinach rigatoni. So they did it the first time, and it was a bit too saucy, was their feedback. They couldn't taste the spinach and ricotta filling. Then they trialled it again, so they did a little less saucier, baked it for a bit longer, added some extra cheese, and then this was the final product on the end of the night. So in here you've got your trial 1, trial 2, trial 3. So this information was actually shared to this person because she wasn't one of the ones trialling it, so they had to communicate this through, or they got it from their stakeholder feedback forms. And then so we've got our recipes as evidence of what they did and how it went. And then another one was their bruschetta. So this was just a dish that they added. It wasn't the one that they were using for this assessment, but I still need to see evidence of how and why it ended up on the menu.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and then we just go through. This was their 3rd entree, a vegetarian quesadilla. So all their entrees were actually vegetarian, so they went above and beyond. This was their vegetarian main, so they chose to do a margarita pizza. So this was essentially trial 1. They decided that it was too big to serve as one pizza, so they decided to cut it in half and trial it like that. When they trialled it a second time, they split the dough in 2 and actually created still a circle. Oh, sorry, that was trial 1. That was trial 2, and that was the final product. So they were quite happy with how that went. They got some really good feedback. And then they had a chicken pasta. So they essentially broke up into pairs, this group. And so each pair was in charge of an entree, a main, and a dessert when it came time to service. And it was generally the one that they had trialled and tested. So one of their mains was a chicken parmigiana, so they had tried this a couple of times because they weren't comfortable with how the chicken was coming out. But as a group, they decided that it was still good enough to make the menu. Dessert-wise, we had a trifle. We had a tiramisu. And we had a salted caramel cheesecake. So it had pretzels in the base and some popcorn. And then so they have to do a final evaluation of the day and how it went. So as soon as they get to school, they check in if their hub teachers come in for the day. They prep, they organise, they plan, they readjust their plan and reflect and readjust their plan and go and check in with each other. So it was quite a big evaluation. It was a long day. And then we need to talk about why we use planning tools. So this is where the group work comes into light, is how they use their planning tools, how did they choose which planning tools they used, and then how did their group actually effectively use them well enough. So some of the planning tools that they used was group chats, so they could communicate. They had a shared doc where they stored a lot of their information. They like to use their recipes as a planning tool, so they could do their calculations for their shopping lists. So the journal that I was talking about earlier, so they wrote every lesson. We had about 4 or 5 weeks of definite strong planning, and then probably another 2-3 weeks of explaining what the assessment is and what it's going to look like. We had to set goals. So as a group, they had to determine whether they met those goals at the end of the week, and if they didn't, why, and how were they going to make up that time. So that was where the conversations really got a bit nitty-gritty. Who wasn't pulling their weight, who wasn't making the decision. They have to do a health and safety plan, figuring out how they're going to address food handling issues. They had to do some flow charts, those for the prototyping, feedback forms they used. And then conclusion, hopefully, recipes. I want to see the journal is what I'm looking for. So this was one of our planning tools. So each week, each peer, they decided to go peers to do their trials, and this is what they'd order from me, and I would go out and buy all the stuff ready for them to cook on a Friday afternoon. So that was their shopping list. So the journal entries. So this was probably our main focus, was making sure that everybody was on the same page, everybody knew what they were doing, they were setting goals, they were working together. So that was the main thing that held them together, was the journal entries. And then addition goals. So the goal for this week was we need to trial this, we need to make sure that this dish is decided, that we are deciding decorations today, or we're designing our menus or our feedback forms. Health and safety plan. So they only had to do the health and safety plan for the vegetarian dishes that they were doing for the assessment. And then their little flow chart into what processes and steps did they take to address any of those issues. This was one of their feedback forms from when they trialled their dishes. The one on the evening was a lot more in-depth, but they just used that for their testing and their trialling.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that's data 2.4.
Yes, so the two standards are, so the select and use planning tools to manage and develop an outcome. So the outcome was obviously their restaurant. And then the other standard is undertake effective development to make and trial a prototype. The prototype was their vegetarian dishes on their menu.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. That's
No worries.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good fun too.
Good.